better reading scores, and a better environment for innovation. The name of the game as Oklahoma lawmakers join the state chamber to unveil its 2026 annual agenda. The agenda, the first guided by Oklahoma Competes, a framework launched in the fall of 2025 following an in-depth national analysis of Oklahoma's economic climate. The plan designed to make Oklahoma more competitive on the national landscape.
Good news is on economic climate and infrastructure, in those two buckets, this legislature and these leaders over the last few years have done some tremendous work in those areas. So if you had a dashboard of green, yellow, red, of things that were going well in Oklahoma, economic climate, infrastructure would be blinking green. We are very competitive in those areas. On the education and workforce development and innovation and entrepreneurship, there's work to do there. And that's where a lot of today's agenda and our agenda for this year is going to focus on those areas.
Literacy and education anchor the agenda. Oklahoma currently ranks 49th nationally in fourth grade reading scores, a statistic leaders say must change for Oklahoma's workforce to compete in a modern economy.
Learn to read so that you can read to learn. And statistically it shows that if students are behind in the third grade, they're statistically likely to be behind in middle school, statistically likely to be behind in high school, statistically likely to be behind as an adult. And so if you want the very foundation of how do we move the needle, not only in education, but when you talk about economic development, you talk about public safety, you talk about incarceration rates, generational poverty, how do you break those cycles? Well, it starts with better education, and you can't have better education if kids can't learn how to properly read.
We've got to get this right, as the speaker said. As the chair of education, it is my job to champion what education can do for all kids, and I do believe it's the tide that lifts all boats. You're going to see a focus from both chambers in the legislature on ensuring that teachers, from the time they become teacher candidates in College of Education, are trained on the science, the brain science, the neuroscience. What we know now is the discipline of science of reading. So that it's all aligned, so that when a teacher candidate becomes a certified teacher in the state of Oklahoma, they show up prepared from day one in an early childhood classroom.
The agenda also prioritizing innovation and entrepreneurship, particularly improving Oklahoma's lab-to-market pipeline.
As we have a very outdated technology transfer guidance statute. It was brought about in 1989, and obviously a lot has changed since then, from research to innovation to investment. And so this legislation will simply direct our state regents to update and modernize that guidance. So that we can aid Oklahoma in being competitive. We want to attract the advanced industries that will bring the jobs that we want here in Oklahoma.
Now, we've got to turn these great research universities into companies and into jobs in Oklahoma, and that's what we're going to do.
Expanding research and development capacity across both public and private sectors is another key pillar of the agenda.
If we are going to be competitive and we are going to encourage a new opportunity in any industry, we have to make sure that we have the tools in the toolbox. Most of the research and development activity is in the private sector, but we know that higher ed is so incredibly important. It is a critical piece to this whole package.
The agenda also calls for continued progress in tax policy and incentives, building on recent reforms that have moved Oklahoma from 39th to 19th nationally in tax ratings. In particular, stressing that incentives must be treated as strategic public investments and align with statewide economic goals.
Oklahoma has an enormous amount of incentives and incentive packages. I think it's vital that we figure out whether or not the juice is worth the squeeze. Current statutory criteria focus heavily on individual incentive performance, not on how incentives align with Oklahoma's economic strategy. And without these reforms, Oklahoma risks spending tax dollars on initiatives that do not increase competitiveness, wages, or long-term economic viability.
This isn't a one-year, one-fix shot. This is going to be a journey to improve these outcomes. And I can just tell you this, the State Chamber of Oklahoma isn't going to go away on these issues, and we are going to be great partners, and we're going to work with anyone who's willing to work with us